Good evening. Please. Yes, please. Good evening, Konstantin Ponyushkin. Your visit to China. Louder, please. Konstantin Ponyushkin, Channel 1, your visit to China is unprecedented. You have been working for 4 days and have met with President Xi many times during this time. How do you assess the results of the Russian-Chinese talks and, most importantly, for this multi-day visit? It is really multi-day, as you said. This is due to the fact that there were several events here after all, and when we planned this work, and planned it in such a way, we built it so that there was no need to travel such long distances several times. Let me remind you that it was the SCO summit, then a trilateral meeting between Russia, Mongolia, China, and a visit to the People's Republic of China itself, and I must say that this format of work allows us to talk not only at the negotiating table, but most importantly, allows us to meet many times in an informal setting and in an informal, absolutely friendly atmosphere, to talk about any topic, a topic that is of mutual interest. And it turned out to be very important and very useful. As for the results, they are very positive in my opinion. The documents that have been adopted and accepted by all participants, they are aimed at the future. In this regard, I would particularly mention the Chinese initiative on global governance. It seems to me that this is very timely and, importantly, this initiative is aimed at positive cooperation between those countries that have gathered for the summit in China and are possible partners among countries that currently do not want to declare this partnership. All of this together, and such unity of all those gathered, is a very important demonstration of a positive attitude and confidence that we will be able to achieve the set goals. You can, please.
Vladimir Vladimirovich. Yes. Sorry, Lana Samsonia Interfax. I wanted to continue the topic of your visit to China, but about the bilateral agenda. A solid package of documents was signed following the results of your visit, and probably, first of all, these are documents related to the Power of Siberia-2 project. This project in general has actually become the leitmotif of all the high-level negotiations in recent years, and a kind of indicator even of relations between Russia and China in the world. Do you think that the agreements reached can be said to negate the speculation that exists about relations between Russia and China in the world and attempts to interfere with them, to influence the relations of the two countries?
To be honest, I don't even understand what you are talking about, because I am busy with current work, and somehow try to be less distracted by all sorts of rumors and speculation, as you said. This is work that has really been carried out for a long time, and our partners and I have been discussing this for a long time. There were several routes, they have pros and cons, and negotiations have been going on for a long time, for more than 1 year. But we know this is a well-known fact of the global economy in general, even though in many countries we are seeing a recession. For example, in the leading economies of the Eurozone. Nevertheless, the global economy is developing, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. The demand for energy resources is growing, including in the Chinese economy, which continues to be one of the locomotives of the global economy. More than 5% growth, because this growth comes from the base. Some say, but their GDP growth rates have decreased. Yes, they have decreased. But they are. Well, the base has grown during this time. And the more than 5% that we are seeing today is already more than 5% different than it was 10 or 15 years ago. That's what it leads to. It leads to an increase in the demand for energy resources. Well, the negotiating parties have finally found a consensus. You know, there is no charity here on either side. These are mutually beneficial arrangements. They are implemented on market principles, based on these market principles that are developing in this region. And, by the way, the price for this product is also formulated not based on today's prices, but according to a certain formula. This formula is purely objective and market-based. Therefore, there are needs for the growing Chinese economy. There are opportunities for the supply of these raw materials from us. Well, after all, this is not time to our meeting. This is simply the result of many years of work of economic entities on both sides. Of course, this will create competitive advantages for our Chinese friends because, I repeat, they will receive the product at weighted market prices, not at some inflated prices, as we see now in the same Eurozone. And most importantly, it is a stable supply, a reliable supply. Everyone is satisfied with this result, but to be honest, I am also one of our leading companies. Gazprom is emerging and expanding new markets. In general, it's through Mongolia that we will have 50 billion. The fact that there are now 38, and then there are still a couple of routes there, but which will also increase. In total, over 100 billion cubic meters of gas will be produced. It is possible, but Pavel is here, please, otherwise they took him away to kill. Good evening. Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. You often talk, and yesterday, by the way, you also talked about the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis, when the country began to be dragged into NATO. But now we see that European leaders who declare and talk about certain security guarantees for Ukraine, they almost completely concentrate on the topic of deploying their troops in Ukraine. At the same time, many continue to insist on Ukraine's accession to the EU, but we also see that the European Union is rapidly turning from a once economic association into a kind of military political bloc, when there is almost always an aggressive decision, aggressive statements. How can you comment on all these layouts? I agree with those who believe that every country has the right to choose its own security system. This applies to all countries, including Ukraine. But it also means that the security of one country cannot be ensured at the expense of the security of another country. In this case, the Russian Federation. We have always objected to Ukraine being a member of this North Atlantic bloc, but we have never questioned its right to engage in its economic activities as it wants. This also applies to EU membership. Can we continue about Ukraine? You can? Hello, Vladimir Vladimirovich Alexander Yanyushev life. When the efforts of Russia and the United States for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine are being discussed right now, the formula of a guarantee of security in exchange for territories is increasingly being heard. And does this correspond to what you talked about with Trump in Alaska, and what do your words mean when you said that Russia is ready to join the development of these guarantees? In your opinion, who should be the guarantor at all? And if I may say about Zelensky, is there any point in meeting with him now in the current conditions? Is it possible to work out any agreements at this meeting? Thank you. The first part again. Here is the US effort. Now there is some speculation that there is a formula. A guarantee of security in exchange for territory. No, we have never raised the issue in this way, and have not discussed it, so the guarantee of security is natural. I often talk about it. We proceed from the fact that any country should have these security guarantees, including Ukraine. But this is not related to any exchanges, especially with exchanged territories. In general, to be honest, I want to emphasize this. We are fighting not so much for territories, but for human rights. And for the right of people who live in these territories to speak their own language, to live within their culture and within the traditions that have been passed down from previous generations, from their fathers, from their grandfathers, and so on. That's first of all what it's about. And if it is people who, in the course of electoral democratic procedures, including referendums, spoke out in favor of being part of the Russian Federation, it is necessary to respect this opinion. This is democracy. I want to remind those who forget about it. And among other things, it fully complies with international law. I would also like to remind you of the first articles of the Charter of the United Nations, where it is explicitly written about the right of nations to self-determination. But we do not associate one with the other with the territory of the security guarantee. It's like, of course, it can be said that these are close topics, but we don't directly link it. And so the question was not raised during the discussion in Anchorage. As for possible meetings with Mr. Zelensky, I have already talked about this. In general, I have never ruled out the possibility of such a meeting. Is there any sense in these meetings? Look, let's take a look here in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. Some may agree with him, some may not. You just need to carefully calculate, read the text. The Constitution of Ukraine does not provide for any ways to extend the powers of the President of Ukraine at all. Here I was elected for 5 years. 5 years have passed. That's it. The powers have ended, so there is a provision, according to which elections are not held under martial law. That's right, that's true. But this does not mean that the powers of the president are prolonged. This means that his powers expire, and his rights are transferred to the Speaker of the Rada, including his powers as Supreme Commander. So, what should the current authorities do then, if they want to be legitimate and take full part in the settlement processes? They should hold elections, that is, not elections, sorry, they should first of all hold a referendum. In accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. Any territorial issues are resolved only by referendum, well, as far as I remember. But a referendum cannot be held under martial law. This is also a constitutional provision of the Constitution itself. So, in order to hold a referendum, it is necessary to abolish martial law. But as soon as this is done, we need to go to the polls. And this process will last indefinitely. The result of the elections is unclear, but whatever this result is, then after that, it is necessary to obtain the appropriate conclusion of the Constitutional Court. So it is prescribed in the basic law. And how to get the opinion of the Constitutional Court, if, after the authorities demanded from this Constitutional Court of Ukraine to confirm the prolongation of the powers of the President, and he actually refused to do it. You know, what was done in Ukraine is ridiculous. But the fact is that the security stopped letting the chairman of the Constitutional Court into his workplace. That's it. The movie ended there. But not really, because, as far as I know, he does not know where he is, but at one time, he went abroad. But in recent years, the powers of some members of the Constitutional Court have expired, and it does not have a quorum for making decisions. Therefore, this is a path to nowhere, if you just hold meetings with the current head of the administration, so to speak, carefully. Can I? I've never given up on it. If this meeting is well prepared and will lead to some positive possible results. By the way, Donald asked me if possible to hold such a meeting. I said, yes, it's possible. Well, in the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow, such a meeting will take place. Can I have this plan? It's possible here, please. Andriy Kolesnikova, Kommersant newspaper. Good evening. Good evening. Tell me, do you think that a multipolar world, the need for which you spoke about in that very Munich speech in 2007 year, the new poles of which are apparently Russia, India, China, has finally been created, or is there something to strive for? And if I may ask one more question, a few hours ago, the German Chancellor, Mr. Merz, called you perhaps the most serious war criminal of our time. What do you think about it? This is literally a couple of hours ago. I see. So, as to whether the multipolar world as a whole has developed or not, its contours have certainly developed, but at the same time, I would not talk about any dominance in this multipolar world. After all, when we talk about multipolarity, it does not mean that some new hegemons should appear. So no one raises questions, either within the framework of the SCO or within the framework of the BRICS. All participants in international communication should have equal rights, and all from the point of view of international law should be in the same position. Yes, of course there are economic giants, there such as India and China, by the way. And our country finds the four largest countries in the world in terms of purchasing power parity. This is all in the realities of today. These are not our calculations, these are calculations of international organizations. But this does not mean that someone should dominate in the political or in any other sphere, including in the security sphere. That is why we do not proceed from the fact that new dominant states should appear, but everyone should be equal. As for the statements you just mentioned, Peskov also told me about it just a few minutes ago. What do I think about this? I think this is an unsuccessful attempt to absolve myself, well, not from him personally, but from my side, and from the collective West in general, to absolve myself of responsibility for the tragedy that is happening now in Ukraine. What do I mean by that? Let me remind you, as I have said many times, in the 2014 year, the ministers of 3 European countries came to Kiev and signed a document. That was essentially an agreement between the current government, between President Yanukovych at that time, and the opposition. And in accordance with this agreement, all controversial issues of a political nature would have to be resolved peacefully and legally, in the constitutional field. And literally there, a bloody and brutal coup took place a day or the next day. None of these guarantors lifted a finger to return the situation to the legal field. This is where the conflict began, because immediately after that events began in the Crimea. Immediately after that, the Kiev regime took military actions with the use of armored aircraft against the civilian population of those regions of Ukraine that did not agree with this coup. And then they derailed all our attempts to solve this problem by peaceful means, and actually publicly refused to implement the Minsk agreements. So who is to blame for the tragedy that is happening? Those who brought this situation to this, completely ignoring Russia's interests in the sphere of its security. If someone thinks that it is possible to treat the people of our country so indifferently, then they should know that we are such things. When Russia looks at the events happening around it weakly and does not react in any way, we will never allow such things. Now, yes. Now about the tragedy. Now, here you are, a microphone.
Good evening, Olga Skobeva, Russia TV channel. In Europe, they are talking more and more loudly about the need to take our money, $300 billion, and transfer it to Ukraine. Of course, there are those who, according to the old-fashioned way, believe that it is not quite beautiful and very dangerous, but more of those who are ready to seek and push theft. How do you feel about this? And another important question about the special operation. Vladimir Vladimirovich, there is a chance that it will end in the near future. How do you feel it? Feel it? Are we going to the end?
I will probably start with the second part, since it is the key one, back in the 22nd year. We offered the Ukrainian authorities to respect the choice of those people who live in the southeast of Ukraine, withdraw their troops from there, and end this conflict immediately. And I must say that in general, this did not cause complete rejection. But after we, at the urgent appeals of our Western European colleagues, withdrew troops from Kiev, the situation immediately changed. And we were told, well, almost verbatim the following: now we will fight until either you turn your head away from us, or we will you. Now I don't remember whether I once said it publicly or not, but it sounded something like this, but only in more such rude terms. But quite open, and no matter how strange it sounds in a friendly way, now it's either us or you. Well, this is all going on. So, it seems to me, nevertheless, that if common sense still prevails, then it is possible to agree on an acceptable option for ending this conflict, and I proceed from this. Especially since we see the sentiments of the US administration under the leadership of President Trump. We see there not just appeals, but a sincere desire to find this solution. I think there is a certain light at the end of the tunnel. Let's see how the situation develops. If not, then we will have to solve all the tasks assigned to us by armed means.
They answered about Europe, if possible about theft.
And the theft of money. But we have already talked about it many times here. In my opinion, nothing new can be said. We said, someone wants to take it. Someone doesn't want. Those who are smarter don't want it. Yes, it's true. It's even here without any irony, and without hitting those who are stupider. Why? Because those who are smarter are people who are engaged in finance, economics. They understand that this will completely destroy all the principles of international economic and financial activity, and will, without any doubt, cause enormous harm to the entire world economy and international finance. Because alliances are already being created in many countries of the world that are trying to implement their own economic development plans within individual regions. In this case, such economic separatism will only intensify, and the overall financial and economic world order will be destroyed. Now. Come on, let's get through now, okay? Please. Good afternoon, TV channel Zvezda Kakeshnikov Konstantin. Could you share the latest information about the situation in the zone of a special military operation? What reports, if not a secret, are coming to you from the commanders of the fronts, and, in general, how much has the situation on the battlefield changed in general lately? All groups of the Russian armed forces are advancing in all directions. They are advancing successfully at different rates, well, in almost all directions. I will not list them. If you represent the Zvezda TV channel, you know the names of these groups and the direction of their combat work. How the enemy reacts to this is what we see. He is trying to plug the holes, as they say, by transferring the most capable units from one area that is quite difficult for him to other combat areas that are considered more critical. Well, for example, if my memory does not change recently, I need to check, of course. Here we are in Beijing and in Moscow. Nevertheless, the enemy has transferred the 95th Brigade to another site in the Sumy direction. Is it easier for them in the Sumy direction? No, he just replaced it with a less combat-ready unit, and through the 95th to where he considers it more important. And so it is along the entire line of contact, from one section to another. You can't relax. It could be anything. This may be the preparation of reserves somewhere in order to commit some actions of such a more or less large-scale nature. But a preliminary analysis of our military specialists shows that the opponents of the armed forces of Ukraine do not have such opportunities today. They are not capable of conducting large-scale offensive operations, but are engaged only in order to hold the existing borders. But even in this way, which I have just mentioned, this is not an isolated example. It happens almost along the entire line of contact. This is evidence that not only we believe, but also, by the way, Western experts believe that the reserves of the armed forces are becoming less and less. Combat-ready, I will say so, combat-ready units, they are staffed today by no more than 47 to 48%. This is already at the most critical point of the situation. But nevertheless, fighting is a complicated and cruel thing, so no predictions should be made here. And the analysis is exactly what I have just said. Yes, please, here I promised good luck, please. Please. Good evening, Igor Zhdanov, Arty. Vladimir Vladimirovich, returning to Alaska, right after landing, literally on the red carpet. You immediately began communicating with us President Donald Trump. Then, after photographing, you got into the car with him and continued your communication there. Could you please tell us what you were talking about there, in what language you communicated, some details of that? Thank you so much for your conversation. Well, of course, they spoke in English, but it's so broken that what I already have remains partially from my vocabulary. But at the very beginning, I said this at a press conference. I told him, I am very glad to see you, dear neighbor. Healthy and alive. Well, but in this limo, while we were driving, there's 30 seconds to go. Well, such general phrases were exchanged and that's it. We talked. What? Yes. I told him. There is no secret. I told him about what we negotiated in Alaska. Right now, wait, please, what's the question? A cultural issue. Yes, ours. All cultural. There are no uncultured ones. Our relations with China are developing, not only in the field of economy, energy, but also in the field of culture. Here is one of the landmark events of this year, is the release of the joint film Red Silk. And you told Xi Jinping about it during his May visit to Moscow. Mentioned during an interview with the Xinhua news agency. Tell me, will there be similar projects yet? And maybe you managed to see Red Silk too, then share your emotions. In general, this idea of President Xi Jinping himself, we were at one of the events. And I drew attention to the fact that it is very difficult for our manufacturers to break into the Chinese market. But he smiled so sly and said, and let's produce joint paintings. And then the market is open. Indeed it is, and here is one of the first swallows. This is Red Silk. I have not seen this film, but I know that there will be a presentation of it literally there tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. In general, according to the stories, it is popular and people watched with pleasure. And of course, we have some groundwork. If you are interested, you can ask the Minister of Culture from your beloved, and ask her to tell you more precisely all the plans that are available in this sense. But, as far as I know, work is already underway on other joint films, which is really a very good way to work in China's huge, very powerful and attractive Chinese market. Please.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, if I may continue the topic of cinema, now a film has been released in the West, where one of the characters is you. The film is called The Kremlin Wizard. Have you seen this film? Have you been shown the footage? Your role, by the way, was played by the British actor Jude Law. Maybe you know.
Not only have I not seen this movie, I'm even hearing about it for the first time. I can't comment on anything, because I don't know.
And then, if I may, I will also continue one more topic. You have just spent a lot of time talking about health. Footage was accidentally leaked today, where you and President Xi discussed age, immortality, organ transplantation. We could.
Didn't fix your attention on it and what?
Well, maybe do you really think that people will be able to live 150 years or longer at some point?
Yes. In my opinion, when we went to the parade, the chairman talked about it. But Mr. Berlusconi did not actively develop this topic at the time. Well, yes, modern means of health improvement, medical means there, even surgical ones of all kinds. Related to the replacement of organs, they allow humanity to hope that an active life will continue not as it is today. So the average age in different countries is different, but nevertheless, life expectancy will increase significantly. You know that I don't remember by what year this data is according to my union, but in my opinion, by the 50th. We need to see. I may be wrong, but I will tell you in general what it is about. By this year, in my opinion, by the 50th, there will be more people over 65 on the planet. Then there will be 5-6-year-olds, and this will have social, political, and economic consequences. But we should certainly think about this too when we talk about life expectancy. Vladimir Vladimirovich, can I ask you a question about the program? Now. Here's the last one. Yes, thank you. Please tell me, going back to the topic of your visit, to the program of your visit, this SCO summit perhaps was the largest in the entire history of the organization. This is the role of this organization in the current turbulent world, and whether the SCO will be able to become a kind of political union that will more effectively counter threats coming from the West. Thank you. The SCO is not called upon to oppose anyone. We do not set ourselves such a task. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that during the discussion, during the bilateral meetings, nothing that could be called a confrontational beginning has ever arisen during these 4 days. We are all set up to work, first of all, of course, to work with each other with a positive foundation, with a positive one. We are not thinking about how to beat someone, or achieve the best results in the philosophy of rivalry. No. We are just thinking about how to organize our own work in the best way and achieve positive results by combining efforts. That's what. On the same topic. You can. Please excuse me, Vladimir Vladimirovich, please tell me that Europe is preparing the 19th package of sanctions right now. And it threatens not us, but our partners. How we feel about this? You have talked to a huge number of SCO members and partners who may be seriously affected by this. But in particular India and China. What do they think about this? How can we react to it, and who, in your opinion, will suffer more from it? You know, oddly enough, we practically did not discuss this topic. Why? Yes, because, to be honest, it doesn't really concern us. This event in Ukraine is just a pretext for resolving economic issues with respect to a number of countries with economic ties, with which someone is not satisfied. Well, for example, yes, there is a disparity in trade between the United States and India, the United States and China. But there is no disparity in relations, economic relations between Brazil and the United States. The first one. Secondly, the deadline was set on the 8th of August, and additional duties were imposed against Brazil on the 6th. What does Ukraine have to do with it? Although the links were to Ukraine. But what's that got to do with it? Nothing to do with it. There are problems there. Exactly, there are problems in the domestic political situation, including those related to the relationship between the current authorities and the former president. There was a sonar. What does Ukraine have to do with it? Nothing to do with it. This is the first one. Secondly, yes, there are some problems and imbalances in trade, but in our opinion, they still need to be resolved during the negotiation process. Right now, we have just held very lengthy and detailed consultations with some of our partners. Yes, I won't talk now. And with some of them, we also have such an imbalance. Not in our favor. But we are striving for what? We strive to agree with our partners on what they could supply us, what we could supply them. And in the course of this joint work, we will find a solution to these problems. And it turns out, by the way, with one of our partners, we have 3 times the supply to our market. Exceeds what we supply to our partner's market 3 times. So what? Gaining patience. We are looking for a solution. The first one. The second thing is, well, countries like India have almost 1.5 billion people. China has 1.3 billion. With powerful economies, but also with their own internal political laws. You understand, because when they say from the outside, and we're going to nail you now, we're going to punish you now. But as the leadership of such powerful large countries that have gone through a very difficult period, very difficult periods of their history associated with colonialism, associated with attempts to attack their sovereignty, over a long historical period, how should they react? But if one of them gives up, that's it, his political career is over. Just as the colonial era ended, but it is impossible today to talk with such partners in such a tone. Well, it seems to me that in the end, everything will fall into place and return to the normal economic dialogue. Negotiations? The last question is proposed. Come on, let's give the girls a good negotiation. About what negotiations? We will have a lot.
You said that you are ready to raise the level of the negotiating group in contact with Ukraine. Please tell me who it could be. Sergei Lavrov, for example, your assistant Ushakov, or the head of the Defense Ministry Belasev. And in this context, are you satisfied with the results of the negotiations of the previous group, and in particular, the work of Medinsky?
Thank you. I am satisfied with Medinsky's work. If there is a need to do something, to raise the level of bringing it to the political level, we are ready for this. Well, I would not like to specify and name any specific names now, but we are ready to raise this to a really high political level. The result is important, but what our negotiating group is doing now, under the leadership of my assistant Medinsky Vladimir Rostislavovich. I think this is a good example of restraint and a professional approach, but let's talk about the road. Or maybe you can ask him. No, about him. The fact is that I wanted to talk to you about the work from his turns. The fact is that now in the West, a whole wave of criticism has begun against him, very harsh from both the media and politicians. He is accused of misunderstood you in negotiations, that he incorrectly conveys to us President Donald Trump the content of negotiations with you, and that even the quote he is too sympathetic to Russia. That's how you would rate his work, thank you. It is not my task to evaluate the work of the assistant to the President of the United States. It is not my business. It should be evaluated by the person who is his employer, namely President Trump. I am absolutely convinced that Mr. Witkov, in his contacts with me and with other members of the Russian leadership team, sets out the position of the American president and not any other, and our negotiations in Anchorage showed that it was clear from the context of our negotiations that he quite reliably conveys to President Trump the position of the Russian side. And the fact that he accurately and objectively brings to us this position, the position of the American leadership, became absolutely obvious to me during the discussion of Van College, because what Mr. Vitkov and I discussed, we confirmed all the same in full in the presence of President Trump, and he did not object that this was his position. There are a lot of very difficult questions, it's true. But it seems to me that's what it's all about. Those who do not like this position speak out with criticism of wits. But they don't like Trump's own positions either. That's what it's all about. Approaches to the settlement may be different. There are those who say we need to fight to the last Ukrainian, and there are those, as some in Europe are trying to present the case now, and there are those, well, for example, as representatives of the current American administration, the president himself, who are trying to find a solution, and a solution by peaceful means. And here is the first party, the party of war. It always attacks the other party, the party of peace. And everything else is speculation and some insinuations, attempts to reinforce their position. That's it. Trump. About Trump. But I'm just saying. And now, please.
Trump today, even before the parade, commented on his own parade and said that I hope she will remember the American soldiers who helped China in World War II, and he wrote, "It is unclear sarcasm or not. The phrase convey my warmest wishes to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un while you are plotting against the United States. That's how you can comment on this."
The President of the United States is not devoid of humor. Everything is clear. We all know this well. Here I have a good relationship with him. We communicate with each other, to each other by name. I can tell you, and I hope he will hear too. That's how it won't seem strange. But during all these 4 days, during the most diverse negotiations, both in an informal and formal setting, no one has ever expressed any negative judgments about the current American administration. This is the first one. The second, all without exception. My interlocutors, I want to emphasize that everyone supported our meeting in Anchorage. Well, everyone expressed the hope that the position of President Trump, well, the position of Russia, and the other participants in the negotiations will lead to the end of the armed conflict. This is without any irony, without any jokes, since I am saying this publicly, the whole world will see it, hear it. Then this is the best guarantee that I am telling the truth under prison, because those people with whom I have been talking during these 4 days will also hear it. And they will definitely say yes, really. And I would never have done it if it hadn't been so, because then I would have looked pale in front of my friends and allies and strategic partners. That's exactly how I said it was. And once again, I want to return to what I told your colleague on my right. The activities of the SCO and the activities of our partners, including strategic partners, are not aimed at fighting anyone. But they are aimed at finding the best ways to develop ourselves, our countries, our peoples, and our economies.
Please RIA Novosti Olga Samsonova. Vladimir Vladimirovich, there have been various statements addressed to Russia from Baku recently, and we would like to know from you how you assess the current state of relations between our two countries now, what has happened between us in general, and how can we establish a dialogue?
Thank you. You said you wanted to ask a question. You drove 4 at once. Can I answer briefly? Well, there are always some questions in relations between countries based on the current situation or some political conjuncture. There are problems. Well, today we greeted President Aliyev. I greeted him and his wife with 2 or 3 words exchanged. But I believe that the fundamental relations between Azerbaijan and Russia and the mutual interest in their development will eventually put everything in its place. Please, about the fighters, I ask you. Valentin Alfimov, Komsomolskaya Pravda. Vladimir Vladimirovich, we talk a lot today about peace in Ukraine, about agreements with Trump, what Europe offers, what to be afraid of in Ukraine, your opinion. But it seems to me that we have not touched on one issue, perhaps the most important one you regularly. Each of you asks the most important question. You regularly receive reports from the battlefields, and we know that you regularly communicate with the commanders in the trenches and with the fighters in the trenches. And what do they say about the world? They are ready to accept a truce or these agreements, or they insist on fighting to the very last, to the victorious end. I want to emphasize that they are overwhelmingly in favor of Russia achieving all of its goals outlined at the beginning of a special military operation. Everything else is of secondary importance. And how is it better? Of course, by peaceful means, by peaceful means. We offer them the opposite in the literal and figurative sense of the word aside. We will repeatedly see how this process will develop further, including with the assistance of the current administration. Please, Vladimir Vladimirovich, this can go on for a long time. No, we're going to finish now.
At the summit.
A lazy person does not want to work, it's worth doing nothing, and then he is lazy.
And Vladimir Vladimirovich, Alyona Nefedova, Izvestia newspaper. At the Van College summit, you invited Donald Trump to visit Moscow and meet with you there. Please tell me if preparations are underway for this meeting. Are there any agreements already? And maybe even the approximate dates of the meeting are known.
The timing is unknown. Preparations for the meeting are not underway. Here. But the invitation is on the table. Yes, please. Well, yes, now.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Lyudmila Alexandrova Moskovsky Komsomolets, you say that Russia and China are in favor of a just world order based on a global majority. Please tell me, in the current world system, what is unfair in your opinion, and what mechanisms could solve it.
Well, it is unfairly clear that this is a unipolar world. And the fact is that we gather and build our relations not on the basis of the majority, but on the basis of the idea that everything is not based on quantity, but on ideological considerations. They build their interaction. And the idea I have already said about this is that the world should be multipolar, which means that all participants in international communication should be equal and no more equal should exist. And the unipolar world must cease to exist, including in the interests of those, at least the peoples of those countries, whose leadership still defends this obsolete and, one might say, already obsolete system. Let's finish with this. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.